Okay, so this call is being recorded and anything you say could be held against you. So choose your words carefully. So welcome to our call. This is Unsupported Racing on the SRT, training, techniques, tips from 4 of our 70-mile winners and record setters. And my name is Ken Posner. I'm a board member of Run Wild Inc., and I'm also the race director for the SRT. So our purpose this evening is to share some of these techniques, and we think it'll be clearly helpful if you're registered for the SRT race or if you're interested in the event. But our thought is also that this will be helpful to people going out and doing fast packing or fat asses or other unsupported races, and just provide some skills and some techniques for you that'll be helpful as you explore the wilderness on your own. Some people and some may be wondering why this format and what does unsupported mean. And so for the SRT race, it does take place on blazed trails from start to finish. But the Shawangunk Ridge Trail, which does go along the crest of the entire Shawangunk Mountains, it sort of hops and skips among a network of local trails. So the blazes change color, and it is easy, to get confused if you're running hard, if you're tired, if it's at night. We do not provide any supplemental marking, so you have to keep track of where you are and make the right turns. The other thing that's unique about this event, we don't provide aid stations. We have checkpoints for accountability and safety, and we have search and rescue teams to go out and look for people or if they have challenges, but we don't provide food. And part of it is the view that, when I first started running ultras, they had nothing but candy and cookies at the aid stations. I felt sort of actually bad about providing that kind of stuff, although it works great for some people. But today, some people want to eat vegan food, some want to eat keto or even carnivore. Some people like gummy bears, some people like Skittles. So, without being too sarcastic, if you're looking for a gourmet experience, there are a lot of great restaurants out there. The SRT event is for racing, and racing in the wilderness the way people used to before power bars and GPS. And we do want to promote the spirit of self-reliance, and we do want to help people develop those skills of self-management and the ability to move through the wilderness like people used to, as I said, in days gone by. Now, we're going to start here in a second, but I'm going to give you a little bit of background just on the SRT race by way of some background on the event. We do have 3 divisions. It's scheduled for September 9th and 10th. The 70-miler is an epic traverse of the entire Shawangunk Ridgeline, and it's actually a difficult event. We have completion rates that are typically plus or minus around 50%, maybe a little bit higher, but it's a little bit harder than the numbers on the page might suggest. In contrast, we have a 30-mile division and a half marathon division, and since all the events end at midnight, those events have really generous time limits, and we have completion rates there that are 90% plus consistently. So there is something for everybody, and this unsupported format does not have to be a turnoff. We have a lot of people who show up, they're prepared, they're ready, and they do great. I'm going to give you a little bit more background. I want to spend 30 seconds on Run Wild Inc., and let's see if I can share my screen. So here's our website, www.runwildhv.org. HV is for Hudson Valley. Run Wild is a 501c3. We are a not-for-profit. Our mission is to support land conservation and stewardship in the Hudson Valley, and we do that by organizing some races and conducting some other campaigns. Basically, we're trying to get runners involved and excited because we know that nobody is more enthusiastic about the forests and the mountains and the trails and even the roads that go through these beautiful areas than the running community. Last year, we raised and contributed over $50,000. A lot of that went to the Trail Conference, Sterling Forest, Friends of Rockefeller Preserve. We helped the Trail Conference acquire a 300-acre parcel that moves a little bit of the long path off the roads and back into the forest. And so if you get involved in conservation, you'll come to understand that there are people who are focused on this for decades, and they assemble these forests one little parcel at a time, and one little parcel helps get the trails, off the roads and into the forest. So we're trying to be a part of that and make a little bit of a difference. Here's our events coming up. We already had the Sterling Furnace back in April. Coming up next is the SRT race, September 9th and 10th. Now, we have a new event we're working on. It's not yet on the calendar, But September 17th, Storm King, we're working on the final details of our permit. This will be another epic event created by Charlie Gadol, who you guys know from Manitou's Revenge and Cat's Tail Marathon. So this is going to race straight up the mountain, Storm King out of Cornwall, with fantastic views over the Hudson River. There'll be a half marathon and a marathon that goes through Black Rock. Following that, we have this little 5K, and you're like, hey, I'm an ultra runner. Well, I'm not interested in 5Ks, but it is a great first trail race, and especially for kids. So what we do, what Run Wild does, we don't actually put on the event, but we raise money to pay for young runners, for kids 18 and under, to participate in this event. And last year we had 40, and this year we want to have 100, and particularly from the local communities where kids may or may not have a lot of opportunities to get into running. And then finally, Pacanticle Hills Marathon, which Charlie launched last year, was a huge success last year. It's in the Rockefeller Preserve, beautiful carriage roads, just the most gorgeous, stunning scenery, rolling hills though. But if you want an alternative to a big road race or one of the majors, this is still a great option for you. So that's enough on Run Wild, but I will say if you like this idea of runners getting involved in conservation and stewardship, we'd welcome your involvement. So if you want to create a race, or if you just want to help out as a volunteer, or if maybe you're good at social media or marketing or could help us in some other way, we'd love to get you involved. And if you're a busy person, like many of us are, you can donate right here on our webpage, and that will go into our mission account. We don't take any expenses out of that. That's all used for conservation and stewardship. Okay, so enough advertisements. And let's start our program. So the format here, we'll start with some introductions, and then I've got a series of questions for our panelists to address. And I think I'll suggest that we rattle through that pretty quickly. It's the obvious topics you might be wondering about. And then we'll open it up to Q&A, and we'll take every question you might have until 8 o'clock. And I'll watch the time. So if the panel is taking a lot of time, we'll speed things up and make sure you've got time for questions. So let's start with some introductions. And Melannie, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. Melannie came out in 2015 and I guess tied for first place in the 50 miler, which we're not offering this year, and then came back in 2016 and won the 70-mile race in 23 hours and 15 minutes. Very impressive time, faster than me for what it's worth when I first ran the Shawangunk Ridge Trail. Mel, do you want to tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Hey everyone, I am definitely not someone who's always been a runner. So it's kind of crazy to hear you saying that I did stuff like that, because sometimes that's still weird to me. I used to be like really overweight, like 200 pounds, and you telling me I was gonna run 50 miles, I thought like pigs would fly first. So the SRT was the first ultra I ever did. And I only did one marathon before that. And Lauren, who did the 50 miler and tied with me, she kind of was like, oh, let's just do this, just sign up with me. And like, I don't think I've ever suffered as much as I did during the 50 miler, but it was I literally laid on the gravel when we crossed the finish line, but it was really, really rewarding. And along the 50-mile path, we ran into Anna when she was doing the 70, and she was smiling, and she was like so inspiring. Like I left the 50 miler, and yeah, for a week I was like, I'm never doing anything like this again. And then I spent the next like 51 weeks being like, I need to go do this 70. So I had a whole nice year of like thinking about everything that didn't work during the 50, but also using all of that towards the 70. And it was pretty much my favorite race I've ever done, the 70.
Well, cool. Thank you, Melannie. I did not know that about you. That's a remarkable story. Let's go on to Ben Leese, who came out in 2018 and took second place for the 70 mile with 19 hours and 15 minutes. And I guess he wasn't happy with second place, Ben. So you came back the next year in 16 28, which is a blistering time, and won the 70-mile division. Ben, welcome, and why don't you share a little bit about yourself with folks?
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks to Russ. I guess I have to come back again now, which wasn't necessarily.
Right.
No, I'm kind of coming from the other end. I'm 41 now, and I've actually pretty much always been a runner. I guess I started right at the end of primary school in the UK, so I've been running probably 30 years now. It's ebbed and flowed, how much I've done at any particular point in my life, but there's always been, as there is for anything that you do for that amount of time, a need to keep it fresh and keep finding new ways to inspire yourself. So sometimes it was triathlon, got into marathons in the 2012 to 15 period. And then, as I guess happens to a lot of people, the Siren Song of Ultras started calling, and just like Melannie, the SRT was actually my first one. And then the second edition that I did was my second, and I'm only at 3 at this point. So still a relative newbie. I guess for a number of people on this call have a lot more experience than I do, but I like what Melannie said. I mean, it's a truly spectacular race to begin and continue your ultra career, and I had a great time.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. Let's go into Katie. Katie, you showed up in 2021, and by the way, Melanie's record lasted for 5 years, but in 2021, Katie, you came out and won the race in 19 hours and 12 minutes. I think you had some practice with mountains, or so I've heard, but welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah,
please.
Thanks, Ken. So yeah, my stomping grounds are kind of the high peaks in the Adirondacks. Before 2020, I didn't really consider myself much of an athlete. I was an avid hiker, but that's really about it. And then in September 2020, I met a woman named Bethany, and she convinced me to join her on a unsupported through hike of the 46 high peaks. So we were successful in setting the first women's FKT. So I think that's probably where a lot of people know my name from. And then I recovered from that over the course of the winter. And then in March of 2021, I was like, what's better than hiking in the mountains, running in the mountains, because then you can see even more. So I started running and just did a ton of like super low aerobic base style training, signed up for the SRT after being harassed by Bill Hoffman, which some people on the call may know. Bill, he's kind of made a name for himself. Yeah, he's a great guy. And he was like, you need to go and run it and you're going to win. And I was like, okay, Bill, this will be my first trail race ever. I don't know that I'm going to win, but I'll go and I'll give it my all. So I guess I should listen to Bill more often. But yeah, the SRT was my first trail race also. So that's cool to hear that from some other folks on the panel. Maybe that's like our good luck charm. And it was an amazing experience. You can feel the heart in the race, really. Ken and Todd, this is their baby, and you feel that throughout the race. And it was just a really beautiful, like spiritual experience, running through the night. I really enjoyed the scenery. Just the whole experience was really life-changing for me. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Well, thank you for being here. Be careful with Bill. I mean, you might follow his advice once and it works out great, and second, but he, sometimes these strategies end up in dangerous zones over time. But Bill is a veteran of the 70 and the 30-mile race, and I think the 50 too. So he gave you good advice here. So Russ came along in 2021, and it was a very close battle with respect to Ben's record. But Russ, you improved the record by 6 minutes to 16:22, and I had to go out with a fire extinguisher. You ran so fast, you started a little brush fire by the checkpoint 4, but we got it out, so no big deal. Russ, welcome, and just share a little bit about yourself with our audience, please.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Melannie and Katie, I guess I'm kind of like a mix between the two of you. So I didn't start running until maybe like 9 years ago. Prior to that, I spent about 5 or 6 years backpacking with my wife. We did section hikes. We hiked the entire Appalachian Trail, White Mountains, things like that. Katie, for your experience was kind of similar to mine. The backpacking was fun. I love nature. I love the outdoors. And I kind of got into trail running for the ability to see things a little bit at a faster pace, see more of it. So yeah, about 9 years ago, kind of got into trail running, quickly discovered the ultra community, and found that I really enjoy challenging myself and seeing what I can do, what my capabilities are. So yeah, it's been doing it for 9 years. SRT is the first unsupported race I've done, but I don't know how many races I've done, 100 miles, 100 Ks, so forth. Manitou, all that fun stuff is on my list. But SRT was really cool. I enjoyed. Definitely different from the perspective of starting at 8 o'clock at night and starting at that point. That's the first time I've done that, and that was a good experience. Really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Great. Well, thank you, Russ, and everybody. By the way, funny story, we originally designed the race to start in the north and go south, but that ran afoul of Minnewaska's rules about getting people out of the park in dark. We tried to explain, how many events took place at night, but it didn't matter. So we changed it around, and that's the reason it now goes from south to north. So let me throw out a question to the panel. And the first question is, what was the single toughest point for you in the race, and how'd you get through it? And we can change the order around, but why don't we start with Melannie and go through the same sequence, then we'll change things around a little bit.
The toughest part for me, and this is hopefully not going to be for other people, is like the reroute happened the year I did it. And like, that was the only part I couldn't practice. And so when I got there, it like completely threw my game off. And then I realized I hadn't been drinking enough water. It was like everything kind of culminated, and I like really had to I literally talked to myself out loud. It was like, you're not going to quit right here. Like, the next part, just get through it. But I wasn't really sure if I was going the right way. Like the second that I got to like the Vicadier Falls and I knew I was on the right path, like my entire mood changed again. But like that was so rough for me.
By the way, that's a great point, because, when you're moving fast, it's hard to calculate, make precise decisions. And I think you're referring to the year when we had to move the trail up to High Point because there was some fire damage.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Ben, how about you?
It changed very much between the first time and the second time I did it, but the answer certainly for the first time was everything from 41 to 69. I looked at the map, I did some practice runs, and although I'd been up to the gunks a number of times, frankly, that's the reason I got into the race. I wasn't super familiar with the trail from Sam's Point onwards, and I had looked at the map and the elevation profile and somehow internalized that from 41 onwards, it was all downhill. And that is just not the case. And it's not only not the case, the trail is, in retrospect, objectively much prettier, much more involving. It's the right way to run the race from my perspective, because you get all that spectacular gunk scenery right when you need it the most. But you also get these killer ascents and climbs, which I just wasn't prepared for. Like the climb up to Sam's Point when your legs are already screaming and suddenly someone's asking to scale a 10-foot rock wall. It was bonkers, and I found it very depressing. This was also the moment where like Andrew Wilkins ran away from me, so I was in kind of a sore mood anyway. But I think it behooves everyone who's thinking about doing this race to sort of get on that trail and know that as beautiful as the trail is from 41 onwards, it's demanding, and you are not home until you're done.
So here's the good news. If you're interested in the 30-mile and the 12-mile divisions, you don't have to deal with that climb up to Sam's Point. The 30-mile starts at Sam's Point, but that's the biggest climb in the course from Route 52 up to Sam's Point, and it's at least 1,500, if not 2,000 feet, and you've already been on your feet for a while. So thank you, Ben. Katie, how about you? What was the hardest point in the course for you?
For me, it was definitely the road section. I'm trying to recall what mileage it was. I want to say it was around like 25 or 30. Maybe you can correct me, Ken. I don't recall exactly, but it's pretty early on in the race, and you just get on roads through town for not very long, but I just remember being like, this sucks. I'm not a road runner. I don't road run really, unless I'm doing speed work. I'm not on the roads. I don't enjoy it. It's a real grind for me in just like day-to-day training. So to be on roads when we were just in beautiful trail, forest setting, it kind of like put me into a bit of a low spot. But luckily you get through that pretty quickly. You get to the aid station and out the other side and you're good to go. So it didn't last long.
Okay, cool. 30 miles in half marathon runners, there are no roads that you run on. But yeah, there is a little bit in the 70 mile for sure. And you're going through at night, through a couple towns. Thank you, Katie. Russ, how about you?
Yeah, so I guess I actually have two. The first one was absolutely getting out of the chair at the finish line. I was done. Everything got stiff. But actually during the race, probably for me was the last descent coming down to the finish. Quads were just aching at that point. Wasn't in a good mental state. Like wasn't going as fast as I wanted to be going. And then I have like the half marathoners passing me. And, they're making me look like I'm standing still, and it's just totally demoralizing. So yeah, it's definitely a big mental downer going down that descent.
Sometimes those half marathoners are running really fast because they made a mistake and they got off course and they're trying to make up for it. We have some funny things happen with the half marathoners, but yeah, it does mix together. If you're running that fast for us, yeah, you're going to be in the middle of them.
Yeah, and then you don't know, like somebody's coming up and it's like, are they in the 70 or are they competition? What's going on?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So thank you, panel. And the second question is if you want to talk about your training. And obviously everybody does a lot of different things in training, but if you were to say, hey, here's one thing I did in my training, which I felt like it really paid off for this kind of race, what would that be? Russ, do you want to take it and then we'll go backwards?
Yeah, certainly. So I think biggest for me was getting out on the course. I was unfamiliar with it. So I was able to do about the first 60 miles of it beforehand. Really helped with understanding what the terrain was going to be like, as well as internalizing where to go on all the turns and intersections, because it can be quite confusing, especially at night. As a side to that, seeing the terrain, Katie, like you, I cannot stand roads. It's usually not in my training plans, but I realized that I got to run roads. So I did incorporate that, which definitely helped with all those flatter sections in the Batavia area and Worksboro.
Cool. Thank you. How about you, Katie?
So like I mentioned, I had not been running for long before the race. So I started running in March and then raced in September of last year. So for me, it was a lot just of like low aerobic base training. I was running 12-minute miles on trails, long distances, getting into the high peaks a lot. Like I said, that's kind of my stomping grounds. I spend a lot of time up there. It's great terrain, super technical to just kind of get not only your body used to fatigue over long periods of time, but your mind as well on that kind of terrain. And carrying a heavy pack on that terrain also helped a lot, because I found with a lot of the runners around me, that's where a lot of the fatigue was stemming from when I was talking to them late in the race, was just the pounding of, they weren't used to that kind of weight, the unsupported format. You have to have a bunch of gear on your back, a bunch of food on your back that you wouldn't normally in day-to-day training. So just filling up my pack, 20, 30 pounds and running around the high peaks is what really got me prepped.
Yeah. Well, Katie, I was at the track this morning and, just the track. So I didn't need to carry a lot of gear, but having my car keys in my shorts was really bugging me. So I had to take them out.
Stuff bouncing around. Yep.
Yeah. So, I feel what you were dealing with. Ben, how about you?
Sorry, I lost my mouse for a minute. I don't know that I have a ton of helpful tips here, because candidly, my training for events like this is pretty compromised. I live in the city. I have a ton of commitments here. So getting out to run on the trails is a very rare treat for me. And frankly, as I think you've seen on a couple of times, Ken, I'm pretty clumsy on the trail. I fall down a lot. I'm the biggest danger to myself. So, and, you know, I went into the event with relatively high level of confidence that I could go the distance, just because I've been running on the roads, including, you know, quite hard for marathons in the not so distant past. I had faith in the distance, and what I really spent my time upstate doing when I had it was working out kinks in the course and little specific navigational issues that I wanted to sort. And I don't want to bleed into questions that you're going to ask, I suspect, in a minute, but I would say the training that I did that was specific for this race was mostly geared towards making me confident, not in my physical ability to do the race, but just in my ability to get through the course, to have the right gear at the right moment, to have nutrition, which I'm also not great at. But really that building confidence rather than building strength was what I focused on.
I think this is interesting because we're hearing two things. One is, obviously, if you can get out on the course and become familiar with it, that's going to help a lot.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you can't, you shouldn't feel like you're not going to be able to do it if you have confidence in your physical running base. So if you're not from the Shawangunk regions and you're interested in the race, no, you don't have to travel here. You can make it through the event if the rest of your training has gotten you into good shape. So Melannie, what would you like to mention about your training?
I think like two key things, like especially seeing when I did nothing really correctly for the 50 miler, like two things that really worked for the 70 miler was like, if you're gonna do the 70, I know this doesn't really pertain to the shorter ones, but do an overnight hike, like the whole night. Like you can literally walk at like 2 miles an hour, just get your body to move throughout an entire evening, because that was like crazy jarring. And in the year I did it, like at least three people threw up in the middle of the night, because like the headlamp, like it can make you nauseous. So I think practicing that was like super key, because we practiced it. I felt horrible. And then I did it during the race and I felt great. And then the other thing is, and I work retail, and I know most people don't, but I work on my feet all day. So if you can do like a standing desk situation at your job or something where you're standing, I would like work like an 8 to 10 hour shift, and then I'd go on my run after. So I'm running on tired legs. And I think that made a big difference as well.
Oh, that sounds hard. Hey, but Melannie, thank you. Because I will say, as race director, we've had some really strong athletes show up and drop out, because going through the forest at night was just not something they were used to. For the 70 mile, for the 30 and a half, that's not a consideration. Well, actually, for the 30, you may be finishing in the dark. But so, yeah, we've definitely lost some people for that. Okay, folks, so I'm looking at my watch. We're about halfway through, and I want to make sure we have time for questions. So I'm going to ask a couple more, but I may combine some of these questions just so make sure we have time to take yours. But navigation is going to be a focus for a lot of people, since this is so different from a race that is well marked. And by the way, in today's world, well marked means you mark the course and you block off anything that looks like that it could potentially be the wrong way. Let's go back and start with Russ. And Russ, how did the navigation work for you? Smooth? Challenges? What did you use? How did you get yourself across the course?
Yeah, navigation was actually pretty smooth for me. I think I only missed one turn early on in the race. Figured it out after maybe like 20 steps. So that was the only error. But like I said, I spent time on the course, so mental memory was the big key for me. But I did have the course loaded onto my watch, so if I did get off course like that one time, it would beep, and okay, time to figure out what I did wrong. I did load the course onto my phone too, using All Trails as kind of a backup, because I've had instances where my navigation will get messed up on a watch. So emergency plan, didn't have to use it this time. But I guess tips for others: don't rely on your watch. Always have a backup, because the watches do get messed up sometimes.
Thank you, Russ. Katie, how about you? How'd navigation work out for you?
So I had this really cute plan where I had never been on any part of the course before, and I wanted it all to be fresh and new. So I didn't go on any part of the course before the race. And I stand by that. I don't necessarily recommend it for other people, but I know for me personally, like the unknown is super exciting and kind of keeps me going. And I love coming around a corner and going, oh, I get to climb that now, or I get to bomb this descent, or, you know, whatever it is, you know. So for me, it was definitely a positive, but maybe don't try it at home if that's not something that, you know, kind of gets you excited. As a result, I think I got off course maybe 3 or 4 times, similar to Russ, where it was, you know, I realized pretty quickly, a lot of people did tell me to download the course on my watch, which I forgot to do until the last minute. And then when I did it, I somehow screwed it up and only downloaded the first 10 miles, which I didn't realize until I was 10 miles into the race. So that was fun, but I think it was also a really good moment for me as a runner, as a racer, because I got to go, oh crap, okay, this is all right, I'm gonna figure this out, you know. So you kind of have that moment of like panic, and then nope, it's all right, you know, we're going to get this sorted. And it ended up being fine. I think there was one spot where I went off course substantially enough. I was parallel with the actual trail, but I just kind of took the wrong junction. And I ended up just kind of bushwhacking back over. So I guess that would be the other thing. As long as you're not cutting the course, don't be afraid to kind of bushwhack your way back over. Because I ran into another runner, and he was kind of frantically running all the way back to the junction to run back out again. And I said to him, the trail's right over there, I can almost see it. Let's just go get it, you know. And he kind of was a bit bewildered, and eventually followed me, and we were back on course within, you know, 30 seconds or something. So, you know, trust yourself.
Yeah. So attitude matters. There's different kinds of attitudes. I'm different from you, Katie. I don't want to say freak out, but I get very anxious very quickly if I'm not sure where I am. I did a hike in Utah in a canyon and on a place I didn't know. So I had a paper map, and then I literally, my watch, and I had literally 3 different apps running on my phone because they each had a slightly different map. So I guess that's one way you can you can attack this if you want to. Ben, how about you? Navigation, easy? Easy peasy or?
So, yeah, it wasn't honestly too bad. I mean, it sounds like everyone's pretty familiar with the GPS watches that you can actually put a route on. This was new to me. My wife got worried about me getting lost and bought me one for the first event, and it's a brand new bit of kit for me. But it worked. I mean, I loaded the course and it chirped at me if I was going the wrong way. And I didn't get off course materially at any point in either edition. I would say there's a couple of points. Staying on the trail I found quite easy. And when I came to a junction, I could look at my watch and it would tell me which way to go. What I found tricky was transitioning from roads to trails. And on one of the recon trips I did, I like made myself go and stare at the start of the path that takes you up to Gobbler's Knob right after checkpoint 1. It's kind of a downhill road section. It feels good to me at least. And it's very easy to run, you know, a mile down what I think is, I'm looking at the map here, Route 61, and miss the entrance altogether. And there's a similar issue right after checkpoint 2, just after you've gone through Worsthorpe, where the actual entrance to the trail is kind of hard to make out. So if you get a chance to go and like look at those and just figure it out, I think there's a big advertising billboard there, so you can kind of lock in exactly what you're aiming for. That is the sort of thing that gave me confidence, but I didn't have any issues.
And Melannie?
I just downloaded like what was it, the Avenza app or whatever, and I don't have a smartwatch, but like that worked really well. And then just like everyone's been saying, just practicing the trail. Like there's a part by the railroad where like if you're not paying attention, you'll just keep following the railroad tracks and it ducks off into the woods to the right. So like, you know, we did that at night. So like when I did it like during the race, it was like, I know exactly what to look out for, that this is going to come up. Just if you can practice it, if that's within your ethos, I just think that works the best.
So let me mention something for folks who are not familiar with the race. We give you, you can download or look at the map on all trails, which you can also carry on your phone and you don't need cellular signal. And we also make available a free Avenza map with a trail conference map that you can follow. We also give out the race director's phone number. So if you do get really confused, we don't want to have to come out and look for you. So you are allowed to call the race director if you're like totally discombobulated. And we do have search and rescue teams. So we do get folks from time to time who get a little bit unsure, and we will go out and find people. Not guaranteed to get you there, get you immediately, but we do have that as backup. And we keep very careful accountability at the checkpoints. So we have never lost anybody permanently, at least as far as we know. Okay, I'm looking at my watch. So what I'm going to do for the panelists, I'm going to combine the next 3 questions into one, and then maybe we'll break and let the audience jump in. And I did get somebody sent a chat message and was curious about hydration. So let's talk about hydration. Let's talk about fueling. What food? How did you manage your food? Let's talk about other gear that you found really helpful. And for our speakers, you don't have to cover all of that. Maybe you want to cover what was really important for you out of those 3 topics. And Melannie, we'll start with you again and go the other direction here.
Cool. And I remembered one thing really quick I want to add about navigation. Be very careful if you are running with other people. Do not trust that they know where they're going. Don't be talking too much, because that definitely happened during my training, like every single time almost, that we went the wrong way because we were talking. So you look for your own route. And in terms of gear, I brought the Grail water filter. Works really well for me. I've used it many times. I've never gotten giardia or anything, and it's pretty compact, and it's like a water bottle itself, so you don't need like another water bottle. And I kept food very minimal. I did shot blocks, I did the stinger waffles, and I made like 1 sandwich with like banana and peanut butter and a bunch of salt and honey on it, and worked really well for me. I didn't throw up, didn't feel super hungry. And then I drank the Starbucks Via coffee. I dumped that into coconut water and had that, like a couple bottles of that in my backpack. It tastes horrible, but electrolytes and caffeine really worked during the night.
And okay, great. What, Melannie, what was the brand of that filter?
Grail, Grayl, I think it's spelled. Okay,
thank you. Cool, great, thank you. Ben, how about you?
So I'm going to be a font of bad advice here. I haven't really nailed nutrition at all in ultras. It's not my experience, and I never really feel hungry, so I don't eat enough, and I know I'd do better if I ate more. I forced myself in both editions to eat a sandwich on the way up to Gobbler's Knob, and apart from that, gels and blocks, I really didn't eat much. Water, this is a bit of advice, because the first time I did it, it had rained quite a lot in the days leading up to the race, and that posed some issues because the rocks were very slippy, but it also meant all the streams were very full. And I remember very clearly at checkpoint 2, there was a big stream, and emboldened by that, the second time I did it, I set off only with like maybe 3/4 of a liter of water, filled up maybe another 500 ml at Bashakil. And then it was just a drier event, and I didn't see water again until I want to say Vertigo Falls. It was like 25 miles with no water at all, apart from sort of scraping stuff out of the bottom of a puddle. I didn't use a filter. I was so desperate. Didn't get ill. That's surely more luck than judgment. But yeah, so what's my advice? Pay attention to the weather. Take more water than you need. And also don't rely on Bashakil. There's a really good spring as soon as you get there. And I would fill up there. But the rest of what looks like a big expanse of water is actually kind of hard to access. So if you miss that first opportunity, I haven't found a good way to fill up there, though I think maybe people's experience was different last year because it was flooding and other stuff going on. But.
So when people are preparing for the event, you've got all these maps online or on your phone, and you can study the course and look for streams that cross the course, and those are great places to fill up. And as Ben said, watch the weather is a good idea. Great, thank you, Ben. Katie.
Yeah, so for water, I carried a 1.5 liter bladder And then I carried another ½ liter flask in the front. I used iodine to sterilize my water. That's my go-to on fast efforts. I find filtering just takes a little bit too long. And I don't mind the iodine flavor because I use Tailwind drink mix in all my water. That was a major source of calories for me. I really like that I can just be hydrating and then getting calories as well. So it's like 200 calories per packet for that. And you can get caffeinated versions. So I used that kind of later on in the race when I needed a little bit of a bump. For food, I'm a big real food person. Gels for me just start to sound really disgusting really fast. One of the things I've changed since the race is I have started using gels early on longer efforts. I use like the Spring Awesome Sauce. I find really agrees with my stomach, and it has like a real food, like applesauce texture to it. It's not like a traditional gel. So I can tolerate that pretty well at first, but later on in big efforts, onigiri, which is like a traditional Japanese rice ball with miso in it, which is great salty electrolytes. Sweet potato waffles I make my own oat-based granola bars. Yeah, so it's just kind of mix of a bunch of real food that I had used in training. In terms of gear, I used a Nathan Pinnacle 12-liter running vest that was absolutely stuffed to the brim. I could almost not fit everything into it. And the other clutch gear that I found was, if you think that you can pace fast enough that you're going to get to Minnewaska and you're going to be stopped, because the permit doesn't allow us in until 5 a.m. So for those that aren't aware, you'll get stopped for whatever period of time you show up early. So for me, I got stopped for 45 minutes at that point. I had a emergency bivvy, just one of the little ones that you can throw in your pack. I had calf sleeves, which double for me. I always bring those on bigger adventures for arm sleeves. So to kind of keep my upper body warm, keep my core warm, so I wasn't super, super cold, shivering and wasting energy at that stop point, and then also just starting super cold on the climb up to Sam's Point. I felt like that would have just really felt terrible and set me up for potential injury or strains or things like that. And then I also had an ultralight coat with me that I threw on top. So those three things, they were extra weight, they were extra bulk, but I 100% think that they were worth it. If you think that there's potential you're going to stop, or even, it's unsupported, you're out there on your own. If you need help, if you break something, twist your ankle and you're laying there, it's September, it's going to be, 40, 50 degrees. So minimize the suffering when you can, I guess.
That's good. Good suggestion. Thank you. And so let's wrap up this section with Russ. And I know folks may have questions. So after this, we're going to go to your questions. Russ, nutrition, hydration, gear, what was important for you that you'd point out to other folks?
Yeah, I ran with a 2-liter reservoir. I think I filled it up 3 times on the course. So I went through about 8 liters. I also used Tailwind. So for nutrition, Tailwind, and I'm like a kid in a candy store. So candy bars, Swedish Fish, Sour Patch Kids, gummy bears, just kind of subsisted on that. Don't know how much I ate of it, but it tends to work for me. In terms of gear, I mean, gear is such a personal choice. I think it depends on your experiences and what you're comfortable with and what you know how to use. So I tend to be a fairly ultralight. I usually don't even carry a phone when I'm out in the woods. This race, you're required to have one, so make sure to have a phone. But biggest recommendation is if you're going to have gear, know how to use it. I see a lot of folks that carry tons of stuff and then they don't actually know how to use it. So if you have it, make sure you know how to use it, and just make sure you're carrying enough to survive and be comfortable out there.
Great. Thank you, Russ. Thank you, speakers. Hey, let's open it up. I think if you have a question, just shout out. If 2 people shout out at once, we'll just start with one and then go to the other. So whoever would have a question. And Trishul, I did see your chat, and we'll try and figure out ways for people to hook up and go out on recons on the trail for sure. But who's got a question? There's the awkward silence where somebody is deciding, do they want to be first or somebody else be first? By the way, I'll throw out a comment while you're getting ready to ask your question. Russ was just talking about going ultralight and running. We have had people who had more gear and you know, they may have done more walking. So the first person to complete the 70-mile George Drib hiked the whole thing back in 2014. And we have other people show up doing, you know, any of the events more on a hiking basis and with a little bit more gear. And that's fine too. It's individual decision, how comfortable you are, how light you can go before your comfort level is impacted, and your safety level too. We did have a question. Oops, I just closed the chat on how much hydration there was available early in the course, but I think we covered that. Oh, here's a question from Genevieve. Would love to, let me click that again. Would love to talk about pacing, food consumption, and if anyone has food allergies or sensitive stomach. I have food allergies and can't eat gels, gummies, and a lot of other foods. And I'll throw in something here. I think I just mentioned it earlier, but I'll repeat it. As race director, I do see a lot of people struggling with GI issues. And I think it is from eating too much, or maybe from, you know, the stomach just being too tired to process it. I don't know if any of our speakers want to jump in and comment on that question.
I'm happy to. So for me, what I try to do in terms of pacing calorie consumption is I shoot for minimum of 200, but really closer to 250 calories per hour. And I try to space that out every 30 minutes. I try to eat to make up that total 250. And that also is including like calories from things like liquid nutrition, things like that. So I'll do that. And then I'll also make sure that I'm getting about half a liter every hour in terms of consumption, because the thing to remember as well is that your body's not able to process the calories unless it's properly hydrated. So I see that a lot on trail where people are eating enough, but they're not hydrated. So their body can't actually process it. And then that's when you go into GI distress. I found in the past. And then also what I do is I carry ginger tabs to kind of settle down my stomach and allow me to eat if I'm having an issue. And in terms of allergies, I don't have any, but with those real food options, it sounds like that might be your best bet. Definitely check out onigiri. I recommend everybody try this on their next trail run. It's my absolute favorite thing. All it is sushi rice. You throw in a big old spoonful of miso paste. So you get tons of electrolytes. It's nice and salty, savory experience. And then you just get those sheets of like seaweed, like nori sheets from the store. You wrap it around. The rice makes it soft, and then it's a little compact. I actually run like with one in my hand as I'm eating it. I can continue to run. So that's my all-time favorite. And unless you have like a rice allergy, it sounds like that might work for you. So
I'm going to second Katie on this. I actually, right before the race, like an hour before, I had some like vegetarian sushi. And I think that worked so well for me, like the saltiness from like the soy sauce and the rice, and then the nori around it, like that also seemed to work really well for me. So if you haven't tried that, I would highly recommend it.
Thank you. Do we have other questions out there? By the way, I'll mention there are other directions, and you know, nobody can tell you how your stomach is going to react. So one of the great cardinal rules is try your food out in training to make sure it works for you. But I got another rule: be prepared in case all that food that works so well in training, suddenly your stomach is like, nope, just lost interest. I've gone out to events where all the stuff I had carefully prepared, my stomach was like, if you eat that, I'm gonna make you sorry. But you know, back to my earlier comment, you can give your stomach some time. If you're not about to miss a checkpoint or something, let it settle down, give it some time. You can keep moving, even if it's just a shuffle. You can get out of that hole, you know, unless you know you're sick with something. And you know, there are people now who will carry bacon, right? So you can go in all sorts of different directions.
Or pemmican.
Or pemmican. I used to eat pemmican until my stomach said, no, that's enough of that. What else? Do we have some more questions? We'll take another question. If not, we'll close it up and let people go home. And this recording will be posted on the Facebook page. Do we have another question? Okay. Hey, listen, Russ and Katie and Ben and Melannie, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And if folks have questions, email me. I'm the race director. You can contact me through the website. We'll answer your questions. We'll get you the information you need to know. This should not be something you can't do. It's just a little bit of technique. Thanks for joining us this evening, and we really look forward to seeing everybody in September.
Absolutely.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Todd.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Good luck,
Thanks a lot.
everyone.